as top what you're doing right now, because what I'm about to tell you could be the difference between keeping your license and losing it completely. New driving laws just went into effect across the United States, and the part that should scare you, most of them came with zero warning. No letters in the mail, no announcements on the news, just new enforcement, new cameras, new fines, and officers actively pulling people over for things that were perfectly legal 6 months ago. Here's what makes 2026 different from anything we've seen before. We're not talking about minor adjustments. We're talking about a fundamental shift in how driving is regulated, monitored, and punished in this country. The technology being used to catch violations has advanced faster than most people realize. And the fines, they've been restructured in ways that will genuinely shock you. I've spent weeks going through state legislation, speaking with traffic attorneys, and tracking enforcement reports from across the country so you have everything you need in one place. Because here's the truth, most drivers are going to find out about these laws the hard way. A ticket in the mailbox, flashing lights in the rearview mirror, an insurance premium that suddenly doubled with no explanation. I don't want that to happen to you. Before we get into all 10 laws, do me one favor right now. Hit that subscribe button, because these updates are not a one-time thing. Laws are continuing to change throughout 2026, and I'm going to be covering every single update as it happens. You need to be subscribed so you don't get blindsided again. Click it now, and let's make sure you're protected on the road. Here are the 10 driving rules that just changed in 2026, and every single one of them is being actively enforced right now. Law number 1, the National Minimum Following Distance Standard. For decades, following distance was one of those rules that existed mostly on paper. Cops rarely pulled people over for it unless it was extreme tailgating. In 2026, that has completely changed, and drivers across the country are being shocked by the consequences. Here's what changed. The federal government has now standardized a minimum following distance requirement of 3 seconds in normal conditions. That sounds simple enough. But here's the part that's catching everyone off guard. In adverse weather conditions, rain, fog, snow, ice, that minimum legally doubles to 6 seconds. And here's what makes this dangerous for unsuspecting drivers. If you are involved in a rear-end collision and any officer determines that you are following closer than the legal standard, you are automatically assigned full fault. No investigation needed, no debate about road conditions, you were too close. And that means it's entirely your responsibility. Let me repeat that. If you rear-end someone in 2026 and you cannot prove you were maintaining proper following distance, the fault is entirely yours. And with the new fault assignment laws connected to this rule, your insurance company can immediately move to deny a portion of your claim. But here's where it gets even more serious. 31 states have now authorized officers to use speed tracking technology from their patrol vehicles to calculate following distances in real time. The officer doesn't need to follow you for miles. They can calculate your following distance in seconds from a standing position using LiDAR measurement tools. The fine for a first-time following distance violation starts at $175. But if you're cited in adverse weather conditions, that fine jumps immediately to $400. And if you accumulate 2 following distance violations within 18 months, you are automatically enrolled in a mandatory defensive driving course at your own expense, which in most states costs between $150 and $300. Here's what you need to do starting today. Pick a fixed object on the road, a sign, a bridge, a shadow. When the car in front of you passes it, count. 1001, 1002, 1003. If you pass that same object before you finish counting, you are too close and you are now legally vulnerable. It feels like a lot of space. It feels like you're inviting every other car in the city to cut in front of you. But that discomfort is far cheaper than the consequences of what happens when you don't leave that space in 2026. Law number 2. The revised lane change signaling requirement. This one is so simple that most drivers are going to laugh when they hear it, and then they're going to stop laughing when they find out how many tickets are already being issued for it. In 2026, 34 states have updated their lane change signaling laws. Previously, activating your turn signal when changing lanes was sufficient. The law said signal before changing lanes, and most people interpreted that as turning the signal on at roughly the same time as the maneuver. That interpretation is now legally wrong and actively ticketable. Here's the new requirement. Your turn signal must be activated a minimum of 3 seconds before you begin your lane change. Not as you're moving, not simultaneously, 3 full seconds before your wheels cross that line. And here's the catch that's catching people who think they're already compliant. The 3 seconds begins from when you activate the signal, not from when you check your mirrors or decide to change lanes. If you signal and move in less than 3 seconds, the maneuver is a violation. Let me repeat that. Signal, wait 3 full seconds, then change lanes. That is the only sequence that is legally compliant in 2026. The fine starts at $125 for a first offense. It seems small until you realize that this violation now carries 2 points on your license in most states. 2 points for something as simple as not waiting 3 seconds. And insurance companies are specifically flagging these lane change violations because they correlate strongly with sideswipe accidents. 2 of these tickets within a year, and your premium could increase by up to 18%. But here's the part that's really generating enforcement. Many highway patrol units are now equipped with dashboard cameras that automatically timestamp signal activation and lane crossing. The officer doesn't need to be right behind you. They can be 2 lanes over, and the system still captures the data. The habit you need to build is simple. Signal first, count to 3 in your head, then move, every single time, no exceptions, because the officer doesn't know you're a careful driver. The camera doesn't know you've been driving for 15 years without an accident. All they see is a lane change that started 2 seconds after signaling, and that's a ticket. Law number 3. The new pedestrian yield zone expansion. If you drive through any urban or suburban area, pay very close attention to this one, because this law is generating more conflict between drivers and pedestrians than anything else on this list. Here's what changed. In 2026, the legal pedestrian yield zone has been expanded dramatically. Previously, you were required to yield to pedestrians who were already in the crosswalk. If a pedestrian was standing on the curb waiting to cross, you could legally continue through as long as they hadn't stepped off the curb yet. That rule is gone. Under the 2026 Pedestrian Safety Expansion Act, if a pedestrian is standing at a marked crosswalk and is clearly waiting to cross, meaning they are facing the road, positioned at the crossing point, and clearly intending to step off the curb, you are legally required to stop and yield before they step off, before they're in your lane, before they're technically in the road. Let me repeat that. If a pedestrian is waiting at a crosswalk, you must stop. Not slow down, not proceed cautiously. Stop and yield until they have completely crossed your lane. The fine for failing to yield to a pedestrian in 2026 starts at $250 for a first offense. In school zones and hospital zones, that fine doubles to $500 on the first ticket, and this is the one that will genuinely shock you. If a pedestrian is involved in any kind of collision with your vehicle at or near a crosswalk, and you are determined to have failed to yield appropriately, you are automatically subject to a reckless driving charge. Not just a traffic violation, reckless driving, which is a criminal charge in every state. Here's what's making enforcement so aggressive. 42 cities across the United States have installed pedestrian detection cameras at high-traffic crosswalks. These cameras use motion sensors to identify when a pedestrian is positioned at the crosswalk edge. If a vehicle fails to slow and stop within a legally defined response distance, a citation is automatically generated and mailed to the registered owner. The camera doesn't care that you didn't see them. The camera doesn't care that they were wearing dark clothing. You were within detection range of a waiting pedestrian, and you didn't stop. That's the violation. My advice is straightforward. Anytime you approach a crosswalk in an urban area, your foot needs to come off the accelerator. Scan the curbs on both sides. If there is any person standing anywhere near that crosswalk who looks like they might be waiting to cross, you stop. The 2 or 3 seconds you lose are nothing compared to the criminal charge you're avoiding. In 2026, pedestrian protection laws have teeth, and those teeth are pointed directly at drivers who think the old rules still apply. Law number 4, the updated aggressive driving classification. Quick question before we go any further. Are you subscribed? Because what I'm about to cover next, the aggressive driving law, the new parking regulations, and one rule involving your headlights that almost nobody knows about, these are the ones generating the most confusion and the most money in fines right now. Hit that subscribe button and let's keep going. Here's a law that sounds like it wouldn't affect careful drivers, and that's exactly why it's so dangerous. Because the 2026 updated aggressive driving classification now includes behaviors that most people consider completely normal. Previously, aggressive driving required a combination of serious violations, excessive speeding, dangerous weaving, deliberate intimidation. You had to be behaving in a genuinely threatening way to get hit with this charge. In 2026, the threshold has been dramatically lowered, and the combination triggers have been expanded. Here's what now qualifies as aggressive driving. Any combination of 2 or more of the following within a single mile of road travel: speeding more than 10 miles per hour over the limit, failing to signal a lane change, following closer than the legal standard, failing to yield, cutting off another vehicle, or failing to allow a merging vehicle to enter your lane safely. Let me repeat that. 2 of those behaviors within 1 mile. That's it. That's the new definition of aggressive driving in 28 states. And here's what makes this genuinely alarming. Aggressive driving is not a traffic violation. It is a criminal misdemeanor. We are talking about potential fines between $1,000 and $2,500, mandatory court appearance, possible license suspension of up to 6 months, and a criminal record that shows up on background checks. Think about your morning commute. You're running 5 minutes late. You go 12 miles per hour over the speed limit, and you change lanes without waiting your full 3 seconds. Under the 2026 definition, that combination could qualify as aggressive driving, a criminal charge, for being a little late to work. Here's how to protect yourself. Stop thinking about these traffic laws individually. Start thinking about your entire behavioral pattern on the road, because in 2026, it's not just about whether any single action is illegal. It's about whether your pattern of driving that day tells a story of aggression, and cameras and officers are trained to look for that pattern. Law number 5, the hands-free navigation interaction rule. You already know about hands-free phone laws. You've had to adapt to those. But here's what 2026 just added that almost nobody is talking about yet. It's not just phone calls anymore. In 2026, 39 states have now explicitly included navigation interaction in their distracted driving statutes. Here's what that means in plain language. If your GPS app, whether it's Google Maps, Waze, Apple Maps, or any built-in navigation system, requires any manual input while your vehicle is in motion, that interaction is now classified as distracted driving. Typing a destination, zooming the map, changing the route, dismissing a notification from the app. All of it. Any touch interaction with a navigation system while the vehicle is moving is now a primary enforcement violation. Let me repeat that. You cannot touch your GPS app while the car is moving, not even to tap yes on a reroute suggestion. The fine for a first offense starts at $200. But here's the part that's really blindsiding people. If you have a dashboard-mounted phone and an officer or camera detects arm movement consistent with screen interaction, you can be stopped. The law doesn't require them to prove you were on a call. Movement toward a mounted screen while in motion is now sufficient probable cause in most of these 39 states. The solution is simple but requires discipline. Before you put the car in drive, your navigation must be fully set up and running. Destination entered, route selected, volume adjusted. Everything done before you move. If you need to make a change mid-trip, the only legal option is to pull completely off the road, put the vehicle in park, make your changes, and then continue. Voice commands are still legal, but here's the limitation that's catching people. If the voice command fails and the app asks you to manually confirm something on screen, and you touch it while moving, that's the violation. If voice commands aren't working reliably, pull over. It's that simple in 2026. Law number 6. The new parking proximity law in school and hospital zones. This one is going to catch people completely off guard because it involves something drivers do every single day without thinking twice. In 2026, the no parking buffer zones around schools and hospitals have been significantly expanded, and the enforcement has gone from occasional to constant. Here's the old rule. Most school zones prohibited parking within 20 feet of a crosswalk. Most hospital zones had similar basic restrictions. Those distances were manageable, and most drivers knew them intuitively. Here's the new rule. In 2026, the no stopping, no standing, no parking buffer around school entrances is now 50 feet in all directions during school hours, which are defined as 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. on school days. Around hospital emergency entrances, the buffer is now 75 feet, enforced 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And here's the part that's generating the most tickets. The word is no stopping, not just no parking. You cannot stop your vehicle in these zones even temporarily, even to drop someone off, even for 30 seconds while your passenger grabs their bag. The moment your vehicle comes to a stop within that buffer zone, you are in violation. The fine starts at $200 for a school zone violation. For hospital zone violations, it starts at $300, and here's the escalation that will make you pay attention. If your vehicle is stopped in a hospital emergency zone and it in any way impedes an emergency vehicle response, the fine jumps to $1,000 minimum, and your vehicle can be immediately towed and impounded at your expense. License plate recognition cameras are now installed at 67% of school entrances in major metropolitan areas. They automatically log every vehicle that stops within the buffer zone and generate citations without any officer involvement. The adjustment here is simple. If you're dropping kids off at school, use the designated drop-off lane only. If you're visiting a hospital, use the parking structure or designated visitor spots. The 30 seconds of convenience that used to come from stopping at the curb is now a $200 to $1,000 mistake in 2026. Law number 7. The revised DUI threshold and impairment standard. This is the most serious law on this entire list, and I need you to read every word carefully. In 2026, several states have revised how driving under the influence is defined, measured, and prosecuted, and the changes go in a direction that most people are not prepared for. Here's what's new. First, 14 states have lowered the legal BAC limit from 0.08 to 0.05. If you are in Utah, you already know this from 2019. But now, 13 additional states have followed. If you're in those states and you've had 2 drinks with dinner, you may be over the legal limit, not feeling impaired, not driving dangerously, just mathematically over the new threshold. Let me repeat that. 2 standard drinks in some states now puts an average person over the legal driving limit in 2026. But here's the second change that's even more significant. The definition of impairment itself has been expanded. Officers in 41 states are now trained and authorized to cite drivers for drug-related impairment based on behavioral observation alone, without a chemical test at the scene. This is called the Drug Recognition Expert Protocol, and it's now standardized nationally. What that means is this. If an officer pulls you over for any reason, and their trained observation determines that you exhibit signs of impairment from any substance, prescription medication, marijuana in states where it's legal, antihistamines, sleep aids, they can charge you with impaired driving without a breathalyzer. The chemical test comes later, but the arrest happens at the scene based on observation. Here's what's catching people. Legal marijuana states are seeing massive increases in impaired driving charges because drivers assume that legal equals safe to drive. It does not. Cannabis impairment has no breathalyzer equivalent yet, and officers are using behavioral testing to make these determinations. The penalties for DUI in 2026 have also been restructured. First offense minimum in most states, $1,500 fine, 90-day license suspension, mandatory ignition interlock device installation at your expense for 1 year, and mandatory substance assessment program. Total first offense cost when you include legal fees, ignition interlock rental, and program costs, realistically, between $8,000 and $12,000. The message from every state legislature in 2026 is identical. There is no acceptable level of impairment behind the wheel. Not from alcohol, not from marijuana, not from prescription drugs. Know what you're taking, know how it affects you, and when in doubt, don't drive. Law number 8, the mandatory incident reporting window. Here's one that's going to affect how you handle even minor accidents, and getting it wrong could void your insurance coverage entirely. In 2026, 29 states have enacted mandatory incident reporting windows that are significantly stricter than before. Here's how it used to work. You had an accident. You had a reasonable amount of time to report it to authorities and your insurance company. The time frames were loose, often 24 to 72 hours for minor incidents. Here's how it works now. Any accident involving property damage exceeding $500 must be reported to law enforcement within 30 minutes of the incident, not 24 hours, 30 minutes. If the accident involves any injury at all, that window shrinks to 15 minutes. Let me repeat that. Minor property damage, $500 threshold, 30-minute reporting window, any injury at all, 15 minutes. Here's the catch that's genuinely dangerous for drivers who don't know this. If both parties agree at the scene to exchange information privately and not involve police, and then one party later reports the accident, the driver who failed to call within the window is automatically subject to a $350 fine for failure to report. And here's the much bigger problem. Their insurance company is legally permitted to treat the delay as potential evidence of fault concealment, which gives them grounds to investigate and potentially deny the claim. In 2026, a handshake agreement at the scene doesn't protect you. Only the official report within the legal window protects you. My advice is simple. The moment any accident happens, no matter how minor, call 911 immediately. Don't assess damage first. Don't have a conversation with the other driver first. Call first, assess second, talk third. Because that 30-minute clock starts the moment the incident occurs, not the moment you decide to report it. Law number 9, the electric vehicle charging lane enforcement law. This one is brand new for 2026, and it's something that even the most law-aware drivers haven't heard about yet. As electric vehicles continue to multiply on American roads, new infrastructure laws have been enacted, and those laws come with enforcement mechanisms that are already generating significant fines. Here's the new rule. In 23 states, designated EV charging spaces are now protected under the same legal framework as handicapped parking spaces, meaning that a non-EV vehicle parking in an EV charging space is subject to the same penalties as illegally using a handicapped space. The fine starts at $250 for a first offense. In some states, your vehicle can be towed immediately without warning. But here's the extension of this law that's catching EV owners off guard. If your electric vehicle is parked in a charging space and your vehicle is fully charged, meaning the charging is complete and you have not moved your car, you are also in violation. The space is for active charging only. A fully charged vehicle occupying a charging space is now classified as ICEing, a term that comes from internal combustion engine drivers blocking EV spaces, even when it's an EV doing the blocking. The fine for a charged EV overstaying a charging space starts at $75 and increases to $150 if the vehicle has been fully charged for more than 30 minutes. Additionally, here's something that's generating a lot of legal conflict. Public charging stations in 17 states now have automatic license plate logging. The moment your vehicle is connected, the timer starts. The moment charging completes, a secondary timer starts. If your vehicle is still occupying the space 30 minutes after charging completion, a citation is automatically generated. If you drive an EV, set a timer on your phone every single time you connect at a public station. Know your car's charging time. Plan to return before it's complete, because in 2026, the convenience of leaving your car plugged in all day at a shopping mall while you shop is going to cost you money every single time you do it. Law number 10, the parental co-signature liability expansion for young drivers. I saved this one for last because it affects not just teen drivers, but every parent in America who has ever co-signed a driving application, and the legal exposure that comes with these new rules is unlike anything we've seen before. Here's the situation. In 2026, the co-signature liability law has been dramatically expanded in 37 states. When a parent or guardian co-signs a minor's driver's license application, they were always assuming some level of liability. That was understood, but the 2026 expansion goes far beyond what anyone expected. Under the new statute, a co-signing parent or guardian is now held jointly liable not just for accidents, but for any traffic violation committed by a minor driver in a vehicle registered to the household. Let me say that again clearly. Your teenager gets a speeding ticket. The points go on their record and yours. Your teenager runs a red light. The fine is issued to them and a corresponding civil liability notice is issued to you. Your teenager is cited for distracted driving. Their insurance points apply to your household policy. Here's what's making parents furious. This isn't a theoretical risk. Insurers in these 37 states have already begun recalculating household policy rates based on violations by any licensed driver in the household, regardless of age or whose name the vehicle is registered in. If your 17-year-old gets 2 speeding tickets, your premium on your own car that your teenager has never touched can increase by up to 22%. But here's the part that's truly serious. If your minor child is involved in an accident while violating any condition of their graduated license, driving during restricted hours, carrying too many passengers, operating without an adult present when required, your liability as the co-signing parent is no longer capped at the vehicle's value. It is now uncapped personal liability. That means if someone is seriously injured, you can be personally sued for medical costs, lost wages, and damages that far exceed your insurance coverage. Let me repeat that. Uncapped personal liability for an accident caused by your teenager violating the conditions of their graduated license. The solution requires active management, not passive trust. Know the exact conditions of your teenager's graduated license. Know what hours they're permitted to drive. Know how many passengers they're legally allowed. Know what roads and highways are restricted for them. And then put systems in place to enforce those conditions. GPS tracking on their vehicle, curfew locks on the car keys, regular conversations about the legal implications for the entire family. In 2026, handing your teenager the keys is no longer just a parenting decision. It is a legal and financial decision with consequences that can follow your family for years. So there you have it. 10 driving rules that changed as we entered 2026, and every single one of them is being actively enforced right now across the United States. Let's bring it all together quickly. Following distance now has a legal minimum with technology to enforce it. Lane change signals require a full 3 seconds before the maneuver. Pedestrians at crosswalks must be yielded to before they even step off the curb. Aggressive driving is now a criminal misdemeanor, triggered by just 2 common behaviors in combination. Navigation interaction while moving is now distracted driving. Parking buffer zones around schools and hospitals have expanded dramatically. DUI thresholds have dropped, and impairment standards now include officer observation alone. Accident reporting windows are now 30 minutes for property damage and 15 minutes for injuries. EV charging spaces now carry handicapped space equivalent penalties. And parental co-signature liability has expanded to include every violation and every accident caused by a minor in your household. These aren't warnings. These aren't upcoming proposals. These are active laws being enforced today by officers, cameras, and AI-powered systems that do not offer grace periods and don't respond to excuses. The drivers getting hit with these fines and violations aren't reckless people. They're ordinary drivers operating on outdated information. They're doing what worked in 2024 and 2025 and discovering that 2026 has has completely different standards. I spent weeks pulling this information together because I believe you deserve to know what the rules actually are before you find out the hard way. The least you can do is subscribe to this channel so you stay updated as more changes roll out, because more are coming. The technology is advancing faster than most people realize, and the enforcement is only going to get more sophisticated throughout the rest of this year. Hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, and share this with every driver you know, because most of them have no idea any of this changed. In my next video, I'm going to cover the 7 things that automatically get your traffic ticket dismissed in court, and the 5 documentation habits that every driver needs to start today. That information could save you hundreds of dollars the next time you get pulled over, and you genuinely do not want to miss it. Stay legal, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one.